Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking an absolutely fascinating global obsession. Think about it. In an era where dictatorships have largely fallen and democracies are thriving all over the globe, there's this one unelected institution that, by all modern logic, should be completely obsolete, right? Yet they somehow remain at the absolute center of global attention and wealth. I mean, just imagine the absurdly strict protocol handed down to legendary Indian cricketers like Kapil Dev and Sunil Gavaskar at Lord's back in 1982. Do not speak until spoken to. Do not touch. Do not eat until the monarch finishes. You'd think this is a script from some medieval movie, right? But guess what? The exact same rules applied to Virat Kohli in 2019. Literally, you can't ask personal questions, you can't shake hands unless they offer it first, and you certainly cannot start eating until they do. So, this brings us to a massive, glaring contradiction. The public increasingly dislikes them. Their power is supposedly just ceremonial, and yet they completely dominate global media. So how on earth does a modern democratic system continue to bow down to a family of unelected royals? Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our investigative roadmap for deconstructing this massive system today. First, the royal paradox. Second, weapons of mass distraction. Third, the Commonwealth strategy. Fourth, the hate watch phenomenon. And finally, why the system needs them. All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the royal paradox and media overshadowing. To really grasp how the monarchy operates, we first have to understand the mechanics of how highly publicized mega events are used to basically manipulate national attention. And to understand this, we've got to look at the dynamic between mega events and tragedies. The source material highlights how a single, massively funded elite celebration, like, say, a billionaire's multi-million-dollar wedding, can completely flood social media and news feeds for weeks. And in the process, nationwide crises, systemic failures, or tragic accidents happening at the exact same time get completely erased from the headlines. It's like the elite event acts as a giant spotlight that just throws real-world problems straight into the shadows. Which brings us right to Section 2, weapons of mass distraction. Because this isn't just about billionaires, it's about how the UK government systematically uses the royal family as the ultimate public relations shield. And this brilliantly illustrates the really eerie synchronization between massive government crises and perfectly timed royal spectacles. Check this out. In 2011, when Prince Andrew was implicated in the Jeffrey Epstein scandal, the news was suddenly dominated by a royal wedding. Fast forward to 2017, the UK is facing its worst national health service crisis with widespread protests and suddenly overshadowed by a royal baby announcement. Then, in 2022, when Prime Minister Boris Johnson's Partygate scandal absolutely outraged the lockdown public, the news cycle was completely consumed by the Queen's death. Now, you might be wondering, isn't the timing of a royal death just pure coincidence? Well, consider the bridge protocols. These aren't flukes, they are meticulously pre-planned state operations. You've got Operation London Bridge for the Queen, Menai Bridge for King Charles, Forth Bridge for Prince Philip. The media coverage, the headlines, the political speeches, they're all planned decades in advance. For example, Operation Tay Bridge, following the Queen Mother's death in 2002, conveniently buried the massive controversies surrounding Prime Minister Tony Blair and the Iraq War. And executing these massive distractions, it isn't cheap. £20 million. That is the staggering amount of taxpayer money the UK government willingly spent just on security for the 2011 royal wedding alone. We are talking snipers on rooftops, helicopters, military parades, the whole shebang. So while the everyday public struggles financially, the government is just happily footing the bill for these incredibly opulent distractions. It all really comes back to this famous metaphor by the ancient Roman poet Juvenal. Give them bread and circuses and they will never revolt. In a modern democracy, politicians are completely beholden to the public's perception. If the public is focused on inflation or corruption, they vote the politicians out. So the royals provide the perfect, shiny circus to distract the public, allowing politicians to completely avoid true accountability. Let's move to Section 3, the Commonwealth strategy. Because the royals aren't just a domestic PR tool, they actually hold immense international geopolitical leverage. So the British Empire extracted massive wealth from its colonies, leaving a legacy of deep, deep resentment. But in 1948, through the London Declaration, they cleverly rebranded this negative history of colonization into a quote-unquote family called the Commonwealth.
Today, there are 56 member nations, and shockingly, the royal family still constitutionally rules 15 of them and symbolically rules another 41. So the crucial point is, why don't these countries just leave? Well, because declaring political freedom is easy, but achieving economic freedom, that is incredibly difficult. Take Barbados in 2021. They dropped the crown as their head of state. Good for them, right? But almost immediately, due to economic struggles heavily tied to tourism, they had to accept a $350 million loan from the IMF. And that loan came with strict conditions like raising taxes and freezing government jobs, proving that escaping the crown's deeply rooted economic network is incredibly tough. Plus, this global network provides crucial diplomatic cover. Back in 2003, the US and UK claimed Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, claims we now know were false. To legitimize their invasion and avoid international isolation, what did they do? They leaned on the Commonwealth voting bloc. Nations like Australia and Canada provided troops and political support, effectively using the Commonwealth network to give international legitimacy to a highly controversial war. All right, shifting gears to Section 4, the hate watch phenomenon. If this institution is so manipulative, why do we keep watching them? Well, it all comes down to a really fascinating psychological trap. Let's look at the numbers and see how this builds. In 1985, a massive 85% of the UK supported the monarchy. By 2024, that number plummeted to just 54%. Almost half the country and a massive 42% of youth aged 18 to 24 actually want to abolish the monarchy and elect their own head of state. So the public genuinely seems to be turning against them. But here is the incredible irony of it all. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are among the most heavily criticized members of the family, right? Yet they alone generate a staggering 57% of the total media coverage. Think about that. The public claims to hate them, yet they consume way more media about them than anyone else. This is what's defined as the royal hate watch phenomenon. It's this psychological trap where consuming media about public figures you dislike actually inadvertently increases their power and relevance. Just think about your own social media feeds. People get a literal dopamine hit from watching the drama and downfalls of the ultra-wealthy. But by clicking, gossiping, and sharing memes, they are actively fueling the exact system they claim to despise. The monarchy today survives way more on controversy than it does on affection. And finally, we arrive at Section 5, why the system needs them. With sinking popularity and just constant scandals, why not just abolish the monarchy entirely? Well, the truth is, it's practically impossible. Let's walk through this. Think of the political architecture in the UK as a two-story building. On the ground floor, you have the members of Parliament. They won't vote to abolish the monarchy because they are absolutely terrified of alienating their older pro-royalty voter base. Them, on the top floor, is the House of Lords. Many of these members are literally appointed by or directly connected to the royals themselves. So, from a legislative standpoint, abolition is a complete constitutional dead end. Furthermore, the institution is just deeply woven into the fabric of the UK's identity and wallet. The monarch's face is on the currency and stamps, they're the head of the Church of England, the government claims they bring in billions in tourism revenue, and luxury brands rely heavily on royal associations for their global marketing. It is simply too expensive and too disruptive for these massive industries to ever let the monarchy go. And then there's the final psychological barrier. When you compare a ceremonial monarch to deeply flawed politicians like Boris Johnson or Tony Blair, the public often makes a pretty cynical choice. They usually prefer the illusion of a harmless traditional monarch over the very real, often disappointing reality of controversial, failing politicians. So the monarchy isn't kept around because it's perfect, it's kept because it's perceived as the lesser of two evils. Which leaves us with this provocative question to ponder. Are we truly demanding accountability from our leaders, or are we just waiting for the next circus? Thank you for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning the narratives, keep looking beyond the headlines, and I'll catch you next time.